Welcome to part 3 of my Spain and Morocco series. I am Angie Hawkins, the Inner Glow Coach and author and speaker of Running in Slippers. As I mentioned in the first 2 parts of the series, if you haven't seen those yet, I recently went on a trip to Spain and Morocco that was full of challenges, but it was also very full of lessons. And I feel like on social media, even in real life, we tend to put filters and edits on our human experiences, and we only show the positive and happy things that are happening in life. But we all go through difficult things in life because life is hard. And I'm a firm believer in sharing these experiences because, first of all, it's relatable, but we can all learn and grow from each other. So I'm telling the story, and take what resonates and leave what doesn't. But part 2 ended with me. I ended the day, I finally made it to Casablanca because my whole goal of this trip was to take the ferry between Spain and Morocco, but it involved multi-logistics between bus, train, car, and I made a few mistakes. So in the last series, in part 2, I was beating myself up so bad about making a few mistakes. But I finally made it to Casablanca, which was my end destination for that day. And I was feeling better and having a lot more compassion for myself. Because, as human beings, we make mistakes, and that's okay as long as we're learning and growing from them. And again, this is why I share my story. So I make it to Casablanca and by train, and luckily it was super easy to find a cab at the train station to take to my hotel, and I stayed at the Hilton in the city center. So the car ride to the city center was really cool because Casablanca just had like the raw city vibes, and once again it made me really nostalgic about Chicago and missing my time in Chicago, because the energy of a big city can be so energizing until it wears you down. But luckily, I wouldn't be in Casablanca that long to have like the city energy encroach on my energy. But it was just really cool taking that car from the train station to the hotel and just relishing the city energy. And then once I got to the hotel, it had really cool, like regal vibes. Like I usually don't like gold, but it looked like really gold and majestic. And so like the hotel had a really cool vibe. And, even though I was staying there overnight, I just thought it was really cool that I had chosen that hotel because I really liked the energy. But as I was checking in to the Hilton, the credit card reader wasn't working because he asked for my passport and my credit card to check in. And he scanned my credit card, the reader wasn't working, and he told me, he's like, it's not a problem, we can just swipe it in the morning when you check out. And I was like, perfect. So I went up to my room, and it had been a long day of traveling. I think it was only 7 p.m. approximately, or maybe it was 8 p.m. But my only priorities for the rest of the day were eating and showering and going to bed. And because I felt so gross from traveling all day and I wanted to eat before showering, because I felt gross, I didn't feel comfortable going to the hotel restaurant, so I ordered room service. And I start unpacking and kind of get as much settled into my room as I can because I'm only staying overnight. But my room was cool because I had a view of the city. And the city center, it looked a lot less poverty-stricken than the surrounding rural areas, because as I described in the last episode, when I took the train from Tangier to Casablanca, we went through a lot of neighborhoods and communities that just looked very poverty-stricken. So Casablanca city center, it looked way less poverty-stricken, but unlike America, it just looked old because, places in Europe and I'm assuming Africa and basically anywhere that's not America, there's just a lot of these cities are thousands of years old because America is still very new in terms of time. So it's just, there's such a special energy about being in a historical location. So I really cherish the view, even though it was short-lived. I had a really cool view of my room, and I just really loved embracing the historical vibe of the whole location. So on this evening, after eating my room service, I took a shower, which felt so good after a long day of traveling. And I was still in that energy of self-compassion because I had been beating myself all day for making a few mistakes. But by the time I took a shower, I was so proud of myself because despite making, actually, I only made one mistake. I thought I had made two. I only made one. But regardless, I still made it to the hotel at the originally planned time. So I just had this empowering energy of, if I can figure out the logistics of today, I can figure out anything. And this empowerment was interrupted by the telephone in the room ringing. And my intuition told me, don't answer it, you need to relax. But curiosity got the best of me, and I answered the phone. And it was a man from the front desk. I'm assuming it was a different man because he demanded that I come down immediately to give him my credit card because he was like, we don't have it on file. And immediately I was like, oh my God, I shouldn't have answered my phone. I'm trying to relax. And so I explained to him, I was like, yeah, the guy that was working earlier said the credit card reader wasn't working and that you could just swipe it in the morning when I checked out. And he insisted, he was like, you need to come down now. And I was stunned for a moment, but then I was like, no, I'm not coming down. So I tell him, I just took a shower, I can't leave my room tonight. And he kept insisting, you need to come down and give us your credit card. And I could feel the tightness in my chest because the inner people pleaser in me wanted to give in, but then the empowered version of me was like, what kind of customer service is this? Because it wasn't my problem that the credit card reader wasn't working earlier. And it wasn't my problem because the shift obviously changed or something happened and the other guy didn't communicate that to this guy, and that is not my problem. And so I tell him I had to provide my credit card to reserve this room online, so you can just use that room or that credit card. And he was like, we don't have that card. And I was like, it was the one I used to book the room. And he kept insisting that they didn't have it. And it's like, it's not my problem that their booking system is dysfunctional, because the whole point of providing your credit card ahead of time is so that if you violate, because there was a 24-hour cancellation policy, they want to be able to charge you anyway. So they must have some access to my credit card, right? But he just kept insisting that they did not. And so I told him, I can give you my credit card number over the phone. And he was like, I can't do it that way. You need to come down. So at this point, I'm getting really annoyed because it's also not my problem that they can't take my credit card over the phone. It's 2025. This is the most technologically advanced year ever. And speaking of that, because it was like, as I'm on the phone, I'm already agitated by this conversation, and now I'm even more agitated because I'm getting ready to grab my credit card to give it to him over the phone, even though he's telling me he can't do it. But it's a corded phone. So I'm like, that was annoying because I'm like, why do these things still exist? Why am I talking on a corded phone? So I'm getting even more annoyed that their technology can't take anything other than a physical credit card, and that I'm basically bound to standing a foot away from the phone because it's on a cord. But I could just feel the war inside me because the recovering people pleaser, I just wanted to go down to the lobby to appease him because that's what he wanted. But the thing is, the core root of this problem is that the credit card reader wasn't working, which is not my problem, and that guy didn't communicate that to this guy, which is not my problem. And in this conversation, he was trying to make those things my problem. And I was like, no, I don't absorb other people's problems. So I reiterate to him, I'm not available to come down tonight. I can give you my card number over the phone, or I can come down in the morning when I check out, because I felt like those were two reasonable solutions to his problem. And he gets all snippy and he's like, okay, and he hangs up abruptly, clearly irritated. By the way, there was this TikTok thread about what do Gen X, like what do you still say that isn't really relevant? And one of the things I said was hang up the phone, because with cell phones you don't hang them up. So it's funny that I just read it out loud, hang up, because in this case it was true, because we were both using freaking corded phones from Gen X era. But anyway, like I should have been relieved that the situation was over, but I wasn't, because my heart rate was up because I was so anxious. I was like, this is a hotel. He should know I wanted to rest. He should know, like they obviously don't have a system in place to communicate, because he should know the card reader wasn't working earlier. The other guy should have told him. I couldn't believe that he had the nerve to call me in my room and interrupt my peaceful evening for that. It was just so irritating to me. And then my functional adult took over, and I was like, just breathe. It's not my problem. I can give them my credit card in the morning, just get some sleep. Because again, my only priorities were eating, showering, and sleeping. And I had eaten and showered. I was like, just let it go and get some sleep. But the inner recovering people pleaser in me was still nagging me to feel guilty. I was like, what if he gets in trouble for not having a card on file? But the thing is, nobody was going to get in trouble unless I left without paying, and I was going to pay for the room before I left. Also, I guarantee, even if I did leave without paying, I guarantee there was a way for them to charge the credit card that I gave them on the website. I guarantee, even though he told me that that was not even a possibility. So my point is, there was no problem, because the room was going to be paid for, whether I paid for it before I left or they charged my credit card on file that I used to book the room with. And my whole point was, they didn't need my credit card right that instant. It was not necessary. It wasn't even necessary for him to call me. And the reason why this story is important is because there are so many former versions of me who didn't speak up for myself. So before I went to bed, I was so proud of myself for using my voice and having boundaries, because all I wanted to do was relax and go to bed, and I was able to protect my peace to do so. So I slept well, and then the next morning I headed to the airport after paying for my room with my physical credit card like I told him I was going to do. But I booked a driver through the hotel, and I asked the driver to drop me off at the domestic terminal at the airport, because my next flight was from Casablanca to Agadir, which was within Morocco and only an hour. So I asked him to drop me off at the domestic terminal, and he didn't say anything. He just dropped me off at a terminal, I think it was Terminal 2 at the airport. And the airline that I was flying, it was a local Moroccan airline. They didn't offer online check-in, so I needed to physically check in. And I quickly found out that the check-in was at the other terminal, which was kind of annoying, but not that big of a deal because it wasn't a long walk. So I go over to the other terminal and I wait in line, only for the guy to tell me, oh, you have to check in at the kiosk. So again, it's a little annoying, but fine, whatever. So I check in, I get my boarding pass, and I walk back over to what I think is the domestic terminal. And I hand my boarding pass to the guy at security, and he was like, oh no, your flight is in the other terminal. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And so as I walk through the other terminal, I walk slow, and I look at the signs, and I look at all the departure boards. And that's when I realized that yes, there were two terminals, but they weren't distinct by international or domestic or by airline. There were just randomly 2 terminals, and you had to figure out which one you were supposed to go to. Apparently by looking at the departure boards, but I just thought that was so weird. And also it was kind of embarrassing because I had been unnecessarily walking back and forth. And even though I shouldn't care about external validation, I was kind of worried that maybe someone had been watching me and I looked like an idiot. And I was also disappointed by the Casablanca airport because I wanted to buy a sweatshirt because I was on my way to Nswam to a surf retreat, and the 2 retreat leaders were already there, and they were posting stuff on Instagram, and they're wearing like sweatshirts because it's the desert and it's really cold. And living in Hawaii, I don't really have sweatshirts or cold weather stuff, so I was like, shoot, I don't think I brought enough warm clothes. So I was hoping to buy a sweatshirt at the airport, but it was really small. They didn't have any retail stores. They didn't even really have any food or drinks. There was just like this one little stand for coffee. But I was like, it's fine. This flight is only an hour, and I was just grateful that I didn't have to worry about any itinerary mistakes for that day. So we board the plane from Casablanca to Agadir, and before we even took off, the middle seat in my row was still empty. And shortly before takeoff, a woman approached me in the aisle, and she was like, can I sit there, gesturing to the middle seat? Because she was like, that's my daughter. And she gestures to, there's a preteen girl in the window seat. And it's no big deal. Like, yeah, it would be nice if there was an empty seat next to me, but again, it's only an hour flight. And this airline was nice because the seats were actually pretty wide, so it really wasn't a big deal. So I was like, yeah, sure, that's fine. And then shortly after takeoff, this woman, she takes off her shoes, which I'm gonna leave the editorialization out, but I feel a certain way about that. And then she crossed her legs over her daughter's legs. And doing this caused her to twist her torso in the seat, which wouldn't have been a big deal, except that she was leaning back like this and encroaching the space in my seat, and she was leaning up against my body, like her body was touching my body. So I tap her on the shoulder and I was like, can you please not lean on me? And she immediately sits up, so that request was not a problem. But then like 5 minutes later, she turned to me and she was like, I have really bad nerve pain and need to stretch out. Can you please move seats? And I was kind of offended. I was like, this is my seat. And she was like, you can sit in my seat. And I was like, but this is my seat. I always intentionally choose my seats when purchasing airfare so that I don't have to deal with bullshit like this. This is one of the reasons why I can't stand flying Southwest, because there's just so much petty bullshit about the seats. Like, just pick your seat ahead of time so you don't have to worry about it later. So again, I'm like, this is not my problem. Like, she should have, if she wanted to sit by her daughter and relieve her nerve pain, she could have done that ahead of time, just like I planned my seat ahead of time. But she keeps reiterating, she's like, my seat is in the aisle too, you can have that seat. And I was like, well then you can sit there and stretch out, because if she's in the aisle seat, then she can stretch out and that fixes her nerve pain. But then she's like, but I want to sit by my daughter. And by this point, I'm starting to get really irritated, frustrated, anxious, because I honestly felt like I was talking to a toddler, and I had to like just take a moment and process what was happening, because she came in to my row, and I'm calling it my row because I had that seat booked like months ahead of time. She came into my row like a tornado and then demanded that I leave my seat that I intentionally purchased. And the Chicago in me was like, oh, hell no. Like, you can sit out or you can sit by your daughter, but you can't have both, especially if you didn't plan this ahead of time. And also noting, like, as part of my thought process, the flight wasn't even full. So she has other seats to choose from. Also, her daughter, again, is like preteen age. Like she was maybe 12. Like if it was a baby or a toddler, like, yeah, maybe I would have more compassion, but like, I can't manage your problems for you. And so I tell her again, I was like, this is my seat. You're free to move if you're not comfortable. Because again, there's other empty seats on the plane. And this time, my inner recovering people pleaser wasn't even feeling guilty because my inner superwoman was coming out. And the reason is because I was so triggered because I felt like I was being bullied. And I have a huge wound about bullying because my mom was my first bully. My immediate family they bullied me. And my last manager in corporate America bullied me so hard that she was the reason why I quit corporate America completely and started my own business. And you know, I'm fortunate I was never bullied in school or anything like that, but being bullied by family and corporate America, it's very painful. It feels very helpless and hopeless. And it's honestly just one of the most shitty experiences that you can ever experience in life. And it just triggered something in me where I was like, no, she will not bully me on this flight. So internally, I'm recognizing she's trying to make her problems my problems. I don't take on other people's chaos anymore because that was always the issue with my mom and my former manager. Like they had chaotic lives that they could not handle. So they would try to project that on me so they didn't have to deal with it. And it's not my problem. So I can hear this woman, she's furiously talking to her daughter in another language. She's obviously pissed. She probably assumed I was going to be a pushover. And the thing was, I used to be a pushover, but now I am not afraid to stand up for myself, even if that means making someone else uncomfortable, because my comfort and my integrity and who I am is way more important than making someone else feel comfortable. But anyway, after a few minutes, they both moved to other seats further back on the plane, which left me with the entire row for the rest of the ride, which should have made me happy, but I couldn't relax because I was so worked up and triggered about what happened, because I was telling myself, why was she bullying me? Why is everyone against me in Morocco? Why is this trip going all shitty? Blah, blah, blah. And then my functional adult took over. I took a deep breath and I was like, I'm not a victim. She is the way she is, and it has nothing to do with me or who I am as a person. My boundaries were amazing, considering I used to have zero, because I didn't even know what boundaries were until I was 37 years old. So I was actually ended up, after I processed the situation, I was so proud of myself for not letting her bully me. And even though I felt empowered, my intuition loudly whispers in a slightly foreboding way, keep using your voice. And this is still only the beginning of my trip, but every situation felt like a test. Because again, in part one, I had the unexpected layover in Germany. In part two, I had made some mistakes on my itinerary. And now I was being put in situations where I had to use my voice, which for me, even though I can do it, it still feels very uncomfortable. But in that moment, in the aftermath of this woman on the airplane, I could feel it so clearly that that trip was about more than just surfing. And I had to intentionally ask myself, am I going to shrink back into who I used to be, or am I going to keep using my voice and stand up for myself? And so that's where this week ends. I do want to read the glow tip for my newsletter because I do think it's important, because the glow tip is speaking your truth isn't always comfortable or convenient for others, and that's okay. Sometimes it's saying no to hotel chaos, keeping your playing seat, or holding your ground when someone else assumes you'll cave. For too long, I people-pleased, thinking my worth depended on being nice or smoothing over messes. Speaking up felt unsafe. Saying no felt selfish. But here's the truth. Your boundaries are there to protect you, and your voice matters. Using them isn't selfish. It's the highest act of self-love and respect. So on that note, if someone is making you uncomfortable, it is not your responsibility to manage their emotions. Emotionally immature people will use other people to manage their emotional state. And if you are like me, I grew up accepting that role, and that's how I became a people pleaser. And that's how I ended up in situations like in corporate America, having a boss that just emotionally dumped all of her chaos on me. And I had to get to a point in my life where it's like, I don't manage other people's emotions. I don't manage other people's problems. I don't manage other people's chaos, unless they genuinely come to me as a functional adult and want my advice and help and are ready to change and take care of it. I don't take on other people's energy, period. So that is my lesson for this week. Stay tuned for part 4 next week, where there will be many more lessons that I will share, and see you then.